name is Brooke Rollins, and I have had the great blessing of leading the Texas Public Policy Foundation for the last 12 years. And when I look back over the last decade plus a few years and think through all of the different issues that we have worked on and fought for and defended and put forward for the state of Texas, the one that really is closest to my heart is our criminal justice work. I think that what we have talked about and been able to do, not just in Texas, but now in 35 states, and changing the conversation on criminal justice and what is the right thing for society, and to make Texas a better and stronger and model for the rest of the country and indeed the world. It is this work that really rings true. I want to especially thank our partners today, the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. Please help me give them a round of applause for making this possible. And John and their president, Dennis Calabrese, a longtime friend of mine, and their entire staff are real visionaries and want to really make a difference. And it's really a privilege and an honor to be able to partner with them as we move forward. So we're so excited you're here. We're so grateful that you've taken your Friday, especially so close to Christmas, to be with us. But these issues are important and they matter, and will eventually affect and hopefully better tens of thousands of lives. So again, I thank you. I think you're going to enjoy our breakfast speaker. I'm going to ask the director of our Center for Effective Justice, and when I talk about moving into this arena 7 years ago, is that right, Mark? More. We're getting old. We'll say 8 years ago. At the time, the Texas Public Policy Foundation really only focused on a few key areas, and that was taxes and education reform. We did a little bit of health care, a little bit of tort reform, but had never even considered the thought of criminal justice reform. And when I started talking to one of our board members about it, they said, this is an incredible arena where great opportunity exists for real change and to really make a difference. And we just need to find the right person to head that up. And immediately I thought of one of the smartest, most dedicated, most entrepreneurial people that I've ever known, and that was Mark Levin. And I called him that day and said, what would you think about joining TPPF and focusing on criminal justice? And without much of a pause, he said, I'm in. And what he's been able to do over the last 8+ years is nothing short of extraordinary. Just this last year, he was named Politico's one of 50 greatest thinkers in the country for what he's been able to do in this arena. So please help me welcome the director of our Center for Effective Justice, Mark Levin.
Well, thank you so much, Brooke, and really it's our whole team that enables us to do events like this, and I'm pleased we had with us today David Rayboy, our Director of Communications for Right on Crime, Kate Murphy, our Hogg Mental Health Fellow, Shara Schaefer, Mike Joyce, who's done a wonderful job coordinating logistics for this event, of course Jerry Madden, who needs no introduction, who's been a mentor to me for many years and did amazing work in the legislature, as you know, and Derek Cohen, our wonderful policy analyst in our center for effective justice. So one of the things that's so exciting about this work is it really brings people together across the spectrum. And so I was testifying before Congress several months ago hearing about solitary confinement, and I was introduced by the ranking member of that Senate subcommittee, with Dick Durbin from Illinois, and he said, look, you're going to get us both in trouble for agreeing so much on things. And then I said, well, look, I'm very pleased to be here, and I've known and admired the ranking member, Senator Cruz, who actually started our 10th Amendment Center. I've known and admired him for many years, and then Chairman Durbin jumped in and said, well, now you found something on which we disagree. But after you testify before Congress, it's kind of, you go back and you think, maybe I should have said this, how did I do? And you always think you could have done better. But I do have to say, and I'm very modest about my performance and things like this, but having watched some testimony earlier this week, I do think I did better than Jonathan Gruber, but I will let everyone else decide. But anyway, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it, and this is an issue that we've been focused on for a number of years, although obviously haven't devoted quite the bandwidth to it as we have to issues in the prison system at the state level, but frankly it's more challenging. When you think about it nationally, every week 220,000 people come through county jails in this country. That's about the same number that are in the federal prison system for the whole year. And so it's that churn, and it's the wide range of people for things ranging from not paying child support, speeding tickets, that warrants that are issued for unpaid speeding tickets, to of course very serious crimes, and people that are severely mentally ill. That makes the job so difficult. I think that the other thing, the reason this is so important, not just how many people are affected, but also the effect on employment, housing, families. And the research has increasingly shown just being in jail for 24, 48, 72 hours can be enough to lose your job, for example. By the same token, of course, we need county jails. And people that may be in the middle of a crime spree need to be segregated from society. But it's the fact that you're dealing with such a high volume and such a churn of people that it creates a lot of challenges. And so fortunately, we're really pleased that Harris County has made so much progress along with other jurisdictions across the state in addressing many of these issues. And some of the examples of that, of course, are the mental health pilot program going forward here under Senate Bill 1185, passed last session by Senators Huffman and Whitmire. And we'll get an update on that today from Clarissa Stevens with the Harris County Criminal Justice Coordinator's Office, but also the new marijuana diversion program that Sheriff Garcia and Devin Anderson have worked together to create, the mental health court, the veterans court, probation dual diagnosis beds. So there's so many things that are really going on in a positive way in Harris County. And so what we hope is this event will be an opportunity to build on that. And, I think perhaps most importantly, you look at the crime rate. In Houston, crime is down 19.6% since 2005. Murder is down by about a third since 2005. Arson in half. But certainly there's always more that can be done. And we want to further reduce crime, further benefit taxpayers in terms of controlling costs, make sure victims are empowered and they receive the assistance they need. And so I think today we'll have an opportunity to explore some of these solutions. One of the really exciting things I want to point you to is we've got several documents for you today. There's a brochure on Right on Crime. Later today you'll also get an op-ed that was in this morning's Houston Chronicle from my colleague Vikrant Reddy, who is not here, but is also a policy analyst in our center focusing on these very issues in Harris County. And we have a blueprint for criminal justice policy solutions in Harris County published by the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. This is an embargoed copy, hasn't even been bound yet, but timing was perfect, and so we're pleased to share that with you. And Jay Jenkins is here from the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, and he'll be glad to visit with you about the findings in their report. But they did a very detailed job of going through the data and working with various stakeholders here, and I think you'll find their recommendations to be instructive. So I think as we look at it, we have a great opportunity today to identify some of the challenges and identify some of the solutions in this area. And I will tell you that at the state level, we want to get feedback from stakeholders in Harris County about what things the legislature should do next session. One of the things I was talking to somebody yesterday about was being able to offer deferred adjudication for first-time DWI offenders so that fewer of them choose county jail over probation. And of course, when they do that, they get out with 3 for 1 pretty quickly. There's no interlock, no supervision, so you're not really addressing alcoholism, and of course, it's much more costly for taxpayers. So there's things we know we can do on the state level. And another example is the mental health issues. Of course, there was an increase in mental health funding treatment last session. One of the things we want to be able to do for the next legislature is make sure we can show what the results are, how that is helping with keeping people out of jail who have mental health issues and oftentimes minor offenses like trespassing. And so the DS, as many of you know, the Department of State Health Services is in sunset review, so that sunset bill will be an opportunity to further make progress on many of these issues. And so I think one of the things that folks in the criminal justice system feel, and I think it's very valid, is we also have to look at the other aspects of government, social services, the mental health system, so that we realize that there have to be solutions across the spectrum, not just silos, and that oftentimes, of course, the county jail and the criminal justice system is the backstop backstop when everything else fails. So with that, I'm really pleased that we have a tremendous speaker here today to kick off this breakfast, Dave LeBon, who's the director, president and CEO, in fact, of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. And he has really been a leader on this. They have done a great job putting on trainings for prosecutors across the country and even holding forums for prosecutors across the world to explore how to be more innovative and effective in prosecution. And so many of the DAs from some of our largest jurisdictions across the country are members of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, including Devin Anderson here from Harris County. And so this provides a way for them to discuss ideas and identify best practices and share those across jurisdictions. Previously, Mr. LeBon was director of the American Prosecutors Research Institute and director of research for the National District Attorneys Association. And prior to that, he was executive director of the California District Attorneys Association. And then before that, he was a very effective prosecutor in Orange and Humboldt counties in California. And so I was able to show him outside the graphic we have of all the people moving from California to Texas. So, but being a native Californian, we hope that that didn't cause any offense. He's received many awards, including those for his work in combating gang violence and assisting victims of crime. So please join me in welcoming Dave LeBon.
I think Mark was being very, very kind with that introduction. As I'm sitting there, folks are asking, if I can't hold a job or something. As I was introduced, my name is David LeBon. I am the president of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. What we're doing in our mission is, how can we work with prosecutors to make them more effective, and how can we reduce the violence in the community? As they went through my resume a little bit, I've had a 10-10 and now an 8-year career. 10 years in the courtroom, 10 years running the state association, now 8 years at the national level. One of the reasons why I had moved around a little bit is that nothing ever changes. I started in the Orange County DA's office. If you guys can think back to the 90s, Orange County went bankrupt. And thank you for Detroit, because in criminal justice we always like to see somebody else with more pain. So now that Detroit has gone bankrupt, it's no longer the largest municipal bankruptcy in the country. So on kind of that note, it wasn't the DA's office, it was not the prosecutors, it wasn't even the sheriff that bankrupted the county. That happened to be the treasurer that did that, and of course we prosecuted him. So, as an association, what we're doing is we are primarily comprised of the larger offices. And it's not that small prosecutors' offices aren't doing really great things. It's not that they don't have an interest in reform and such. But it's really the large offices and that have the time, they have the resources, and as they're kind of looking around today, to be able to engage in this dialogue and to figure out, how do we do things better? How do we make sure that we have safe communities, and at the same time, do we really need to have all those folks in the jail? Is the treatment really doing anything? And more particularly, have we caused them harm by going through the system? Because if we're having folks not get any better, and if they're going to continue to be what we call frequent flyers or repeat offenders, what have we done, and what has that sentence or term, has it improved our community anymore, or are we just further expanding the criminal population? I also want to commend Mark and the work of the foundation. For some reason, he's a little more popular. And the things going on in Texas, when you talk about crime being bipartisan, folks warmly receive, like, oh, well, Texas did this. For some odd reason, if we talk about the reforms out of California, it doesn't get the same sort of popular appeal. And way back when I learned, when I was doing the bicoastal thing, that you have that ABC. It's like anything but California. So as with Texas, you look and say, okay, if they can do it, if they've moved forward, if that's a reform that's it'll do, you very much are leading that way. When you look at today's topics, you've got two very, very different topics on your agenda. One is the issue on pretrial justice, and the other is, what about your mental health system? What's going on with that? How is it impacting your jail population, and how can you improve? These are tough topics. I mean, you're incredibly timely on them, but these are not easy issues, and you've already put a significant amount of resources toward them. So I think It's going to be one of those active dialogue and everybody in it together to figure out how do you improve it and how do you move forward. By the fact that this event was sold out, because I tried to register and was told up it's sold out, it shows how much interest you have. And already my discussions this morning have been very, very productive about how folks are ready to move and what the possibilities are. To be here on behalf of the Texas Public Policy Forum, I'm going to start with, I too, kind of read different people's resumes. I'm going to pick on Brooke for a moment, because I'm insanely jealous of her. She was the student body president at Texas A&M. I, however, lost my college student body election. So even though they say everyone in DC is a former student body president, I am one of those failures. And it stung me so badly, I didn't even run in law school. In law school, I said, I just can't do that. So that's, one of those of congratulations to you and the leadership you have done throughout the term, especially those 12 years. The other piece is during my work in Sacramento. Unfortunately, I didn't forget, the fact that it's nice to be an elected official. You can actually make a difference. When I was there working in that Capitol, I was a locally elected official, I was a lobbyist, and of course I am an attorney. So once again, that was the trifecta of evil, but thank goodness you've got morticians out there, and don't forget your used car salesman. So that was that. But I really like when you look at criminal justice reform, especially with TPPF, it is a center-right issue, or it's a right issue. Mark's materials with the right on crime. It shouldn't always be the left talking about what are the criminal justice reforms. We need both sides to be part of that conversation. And we know very, very well that to walk into it and say, well, that's what we've always done, that doesn't work. In today's area where you've got statistics, you've got numbers, work it out, look at it, test things, see if they're working. If they are, great, continue. If they're not working, change them. Also with the district attorney here, I don't see Devin here yet. But, for her to be elected, I think that speaks volumes here for Harris County. So, and our work with her. Harris was one of 4 counties that were selected nationally in our SMART prosecution project. So the program that she put forward was the Survivors Acquiring Freedom and Empowerment, or the SAFE court. And particularly what Harris is going to be an example as we push it nationally will be, what are you doing with the young prostitution cases, the 17 to 25-year-olds, especially the first-time offenders? And I see the sheriff nodding. What is going on there? Do you have human trafficking? I'm not talking about smuggling. I'm talking about human trafficking. Is that happening here in your community? Are you paying attention? And who is really the victim in that particular case? So we're looking forward to working with our office, because again, that's one of the areas that could very much move forward and change. Well, let's talk about a couple of the topics now. I've mentioned how easy everything is. Well, let's talk about the pretrial justice. Let's start with for the practitioners in the room. Many times, those of us that work now in the policy, even though I was a real lawyer and really did handle cases at one point, if you go to your average prosecutor or defender and you say, what's going on with pretrial? They're not for a moment going to think about bail decisions or release or anything like that. They're going to think about their pretrial motions. They're going to say, okay, what are we filing? How are we filing it? How are we responding to it? Because that's what our pretrial is. It's everything that leads up to the trial. So first, for that, let's get it back to what we are talking. We're really talking about the release. Who should be released? On what conditions should they be released? And more particularly, can we give them some services? And what's the basis of that release? Do we know? Are they a risk or are they not a risk? If they are a risk, what kind of a risk are they? And is there a way to address it and actually have some meaningful services that not only will reduce their likelihood, and they don't need to be a resident there in the sheriff's great facility, but in addition to it, that they can be back out in the community and you can start addressing whatever that issue, whether it be mental health, substance abuse, something caused them to end up in the system. Can you address those and keep them out of the system? I push forward and say, because a lot of people say, well, it's risk assessment, it's phony stuff, it's what's the harm in that? What's the harm in having another tool? What's the harm? Insurance companies are doing it all the time. the things going on with credit cards. You know, there's all sorts of matrices out there that they're watching the credit card. How do they detect the fraudulent activity? Why do you get that phone call from your credit card company saying, you know, there's been a big charge? It's because they've got assessments. They're looking at your pattern, and when something changes, they're addressing it. Why not provide that to the court? Let's have that assessment. Now, one of the things that I continue to point out is it doesn't replace the judgment of the court. It doesn't mean that the court now suddenly looks at a number and then finally there would be no reason even to have a judge on that bench, right? It's 6 he's out, and 9 he's in, you know, we're done. You need the number and you go forward. The answer is it is just one tool, but it's a great foundational tool to make that decision and make the right decision for the right reasons. I've been out a little bit on the speaking tour. You know, it's not my first time to get in front of a microphone and have the cameras on. And one of the chiefs that I've been speaking with is from Kentucky. He's very strong about the risk assessment is the way to do it. We've been both to Tennessee and Mississippi recently and pointing out that this does work. What he always puts forward is, he says it's just one, it's a tool. It's a really important tool, but it does not replace the judgment of the court. The work by the Arnold Foundation. I know Matt is going to address you. You know, they're doing this. They have the numbers, they have the statistics, they are working with a number of different offices, and now we're even kind of pushing it to the prosecutor to assist the prosecutors today. Tara is on your schedule from the Kentucky Office of Administrative Courts, or Administrative Office of the Courts. She's got all that. You can go on the web right now and you look at all the release decisions, the type of offender that they released in Kentucky, what happened, what was the result, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but it's all foundational, it's based upon statistics and numbers, and it's real. So I'm sure that Matt and Tara are going to give you a lot of great information. You know, sometimes with the system and with change, there's always that risk. There's always the risk that somebody's going to do something wrong, that someone upon release is going to do something awful. This week is a good example of that. On Tuesday, there was a prosecutor in Alaska that was killed. And he was killed by an offender that had been released. The individual was charged with kidnapping and assaults. And I believe the incident was September 21st. And even on November 29th, he was back in front of the court because he was violating the terms of his release conditions. For whatever reason, he was not returned to custody, and ultimately a prosecutor lost his life. So there is the downside. It can happen, but if you're trying to make the right decisions for the right reasons, that is the direction to go. And again, back to why did you make that decision, and how much information can you have in front of it. With those risk assessments, not only are they a good idea for the decision on the release, what else can you use them for? I'll point Milwaukee DA is my board chair. They have been using those same risk assessments for their diversions. If you're going to look at alternative programs and try to keep cases out of the system, why don't you use that same risk assessment, if appropriate, for that kind of a decision? I looked to the sheriff there. In Nashville, I had a discussion with the Nashville sheriff and said, would you be willing, because Nashville's releasing tens of thousands of arrestees annually, do you mind sharing your risk tool with the district attorney? You know, do you mind kicking that over? Now, what I was trying to do is just say, you've already done the assessment, it would help the DA on the diversion issues. He was more than pleased, and I said, your sheriff nodding, no problem. In fact, he was ready to go one more. He's like, well, if the DA wants to sign off on my releases, I'm great with that. And I had to assure him, no, I don't think the DA wants to be Captain Freedom. That's your job. But at least if we can get that information across, there's a very good use for it. The next step in that is not only doing the risk, but also the needs. You know what the risk assessment is. What are the needs of those particular individuals? And I'll point you to Portland, Oregon. The district attorney there is working very hard to say, you've got your risk assessment, you've got your needs assessment. In this pretrial arena and upon this release, what can you do to try to address those needs right now? You know, yes, they have not been convicted of the crime, but they are accused of the crime. And as prosecutors, we try to do a good job. We try to have the right folks in there for the right reasons. So let's address it now because it helps in the disposition, it helps with alternatives, and in that particular state, there is the state money because not only are you going to reduce the jail population, but ultimately you're going to reduce the prison population. All those numbers feed into the state, so there is a state interest in being able to do that. When you switch from that, and I would just urge you to, I can come here, I can talk about what's going on in DC, I can tell you about different areas in the country, but what works for you here? What have you already tried? What are different strategies that may work? And most particularly, if you don't try, you're never going to know, does it work or not work? And collaboratively, and looking at the panels and the way they were designed, you have all the different actors in the area, and they can come together and make good decisions and try to inform them. But again, it's always going to be, what is best for your community? How do you keep your community safe? Now we'll go to the second topic, the right prescription for addressing mental health issues at arrest and beyond. This is incredibly timely because, as you heard, well, some of you do not know, it was Friday that Mark was like, hey, can you come down to Texas and help me out? And of course, when Mark calls, and it's been coming here, I said yes. But Wednesday, there was a national briefing. Wednesday, the National Association of Counties, NACO, and the Center for, or CSG, the Council of State Governments, had a briefing and a call to action on mental health. What are we going to do? How can we do things better? This is a crisis. This is a problem. And in fact, at the congressional briefing, your Senator Cornyn was there, and the Saturday Night Live guy was also, who's the guy there with the goofy glasses from Minnesota? How often do you see two senators that are so polar opposite actually standing in together and saying we need to do it, relying on their numbers? What did they point out? They pointed out that just the three largest jails in this country on any night are housing 11,000 mentally ill offenders. That's just 3 of the county jails. The capacity, the national capacity right now at the state level for mental health is 4,000 beds. Should I say that again? 11,000 are being held by the sheriffs on any particular night. The state facilities can house 4,000. The entire, all 50 states. And what were the numbers before? Prior to the deinstitutionalization in the 80s, there used to be 1.5 million. There used to be 500,000 beds at the state level to address mentally ill. What has happened? It is a classic example, and within one generation, you have moved folks from what had been state, and whether that's wise or not, that was the decision. You've moved them from the state level right to your county jail. Miami-Dade did a study. They had looked at what is the cost. 97 offenders, and this is Miami-Dade, so 97 offenders of their frequent flyers with mental health conditions in a 3-year period cost that county $13 million. Just 97 3 years at $13 million. The Bexar County Sheriff was one of the speakers. She spoke. She is saying she's spending $2.2 million a year out of her budget on psychotropic medications. $2.2 million. Of her 800 beds, and the sheriff gave me his numbers, and he's twice the size, but she's saying of her 4,000 beds, 800 are suffering from mental illness, 1/3 of them have a serious condition. That's what's going on in the jails, and is that really the appropriate place for it? There they've done crisis intervention teams, and I know you have a lot of this place here, crisis intervention teams, treatment teams, alternative placements, and such. She now has decided that she's going to screen every single arrestee, because it's not just those being booked, it's your arrestees are the ones that also have significant conditions. Why did they come in front of the system? And if you are, and based upon the numbers of releases, because the sheriffs are releasing most of the individuals that get arrested, it's only a small percentage that actually end up in custody and get booked. She's saying you're missing 60% of your population if you don't screen your arrestees. So that's going to be their strategy stepping forward. Let's do a screen on the arrestees. You are releasing them. Is there some place of treatment, or is there something you can do with it? I know here, and I've talked with your district attorney's office, you have mental health courts, you have crisis intervention teams, you have dedicated prosecutors, you have dedicated defenders. But what else could you do? Are there resources? And kind of the discussions I've had already, and just these are my thoughts. It's up to you to see what works. But it sounds like, do you have really stuff that can, or programs that can either step up? In other words, someone is in crisis. A short detention is probably not sufficient for them. They need a little bit longer placement. They need someone to watch them, make sure they're doing the meds. Or in the same sense, and that same idea may also work for a step down, is somebody is out of state treatment, someone has a serious condition, and you know that upon release they're going to decompensate. Is there some place that they could look at? I don't know if it works or doesn't work. The professionals in this room are the ones who are going to need to figure that one out. But again, when you look at it, are there options? Can you do things differently? Can they be measured? Yes, Matt, we can measure these things. Can they be measured? Can they be tested? Can we look at, say, what works and what doesn't work? Can you look at other jurisdictions and see what they're doing? Again, not to talk too much about your sheriff, but he's already said, yeah, we've had conversations, and I know within the national sheriffs, or major county sheriffs even, very lively discussion, because this is one of those issues. I'll tell one story that, even 20 years ago as just your basic gang trial prosecutor, the medical costs have always been an issue for the county jails. The California system is very similar to the Texas system. It's a county-based, it's a county budget. I prosecuted what we later called the sheet bandit, but a very long way of saying there was a residential robbery that happened in Huntington Beach. They went into the house, Asian gangsters pointing guns, and then left in the vehicles owned by the homeowner. One of the guys drove back to Los Angeles. He was on the freeway right by USC, another football school. This year I think a little bit better. But needless to say, they pulled over by highway patrol. They pointed guns at each other, and the individual took off, went into one of the hotels right by campus, and created a huge potential hostage situation. But a very long way of saying, the next thing they saw was the guy trying to climb out the window with sheets, and that's why we call it a sheet, is he had tied bed sheets together, thinking that was going to get him out of the hotel, down to the parking garage, and he could continue to escape. Unfortunately for him, math was not his strong suit. He did not get himself enough sheets, and literally with the television helicopters, he lets go, goes crashing into the parking garage. Not to make light of it, but as with all criminals, he doesn't die. He crushes all the bones in his leg, he's basically paralyzed, but he survives. And he was up at County USC Medical Center. What did we do on behalf of the Orange County DA's office? We did not serve that warrant. Why did we not serve that warrant? Because the moment that you serve that warrant, all the medical costs are going to be transferred from LA County to Orange. So what we did, yes, Brooke, that's why don't serve that warrant. We waited for him to roll out, and he rolled very slowly. And that's when we went ahead and hooked him up and brought him back once they had treated him and such. So I bring that is jails and custodial facilities are not the place to have medical treatment. With the mental health, it is so incredibly expensive. These medications are expensive. The supervision necessary is so expensive. There's got to be alternatives. There's got to be reasonable alternatives, humane alternatives that can really, really make a difference. In kind of closing up, I know that here in Texas, you are a football state. Coming out of DC, the Redskins are not necessarily the best team. I think you guys kind of showed that at the beginning of the season. And so now we're kind of focusing on basketball. The Wizards are great. And my son is still continuing to live the hoop dreams, and he's playing at the junior college level. But he kind of helped me about you're going to Houston, let's talk about the team. And I bring it up in the context that, especially with coaching, that I always point out to the players, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you don't take them, there's no question you're not going to make it. And he sent me some very nice little clips here, and I thought it was James Harden, but he has now referred to a recent clip that calls him James O'Haron. And the very nice clip on it says, all O and no D. So apparently with Harden, he doesn't understand that there's both the offensive end of the court and the defensive end. But I will say the Wizards have a little bit better record. But I bring that in the context and put the challenge out to all of you. Do something. Do something. Even imperfect, yes, the whole thing about imperfect action to make your community safer. Can you save some money? Can you meet that mission of improving public safety while saving the dollars, saving the bed state, reducing the prison population, and overall making your community one that you can be very, very proud of, and the ability to step up and show the nation and say, look, this is what we did, this is how it improved, look at what we did, and see if it applies for you. So I thank you so much for the invitation to be able here to speak. I'll be hanging around for the day, so if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can do on behalf of DC, because I know you shouldn't be saying that, but go out and do something, because this is a real opportunity and this is a really good time. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Do we have time for questions, Mike? Okay, we do have a few minutes, 5 minutes for questions. I hope we're not. You thought you got off easy there, but any questions about the Houston Rockets or other subjects? I'll be glad to talk about being in this. It was then the Summit in 1987, banging on. I was at the last seat in the play, so there was like this tin black thing you could just bang on when the Rockets and Lakers in the playoffs. So that was fun. But I was born in Galveston, so this is my neck of the woods. But back there, do we have a question? Oh, okay. Any questions for Dave LeBon? Well, let me just mention one thing I didn't have a chance to do earlier, which is we have a coalition at the state level, the Texas Smart on Crime Coalition that we announced a couple months ago. In addition to the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, who I mentioned earlier, the other members include the Texas Association of Business, the largest business group in the state, as well as Goodwill and the ACLU. So it's a very diverse politically coalition, but we recently released our coalition agenda, which is, if you go to the Texas Smart on Crime Coalition website, you can find that. And of course, we're getting ready with a lot of other proposals for this upcoming legislative session that I think hopefully some of them can help address the issues here in Harris County and other counties. One of the ones I think that we ought to look at is giving police greater authority to divert individuals, so that, for example, creating some exception to the requirement to bring someone before a magistrate within 24 hours so that someone can be dropped off at a treatment center, for example. Let me see if we do have any questions at this time. Oh, back there we do. Okay.
How many mental health facilities does the county have, and is the TC Jester unit still open and available?
I think that probably, I don't know, Dave probably wouldn't have reason to necessarily be aware of that. I know there's about 2,500 to 3,000 of the 9,000 inmates in the Harris County Jail who are mentally ill, but with respect to the other facilities,
I can't give you the number of what you have in Harris County. I have been part, and that was one of the things I tested before I came here, is what kind of facilities you have, and most particularly, is there any sort of coordination? And that seems to be something that this group should address, is who has what resources, where are there beds available, what kind of beds are they, and what is that facility like? Probably the one that I could point to is the LA Sheriff. They actually worked with their community, their treatment community, to create an information network that the patrol officer could actually look in his car and see, where are you right now, where's the closest bed, and is there something available? Because definitely the model is, and Mark already covered it, we're a strong proponent. It shouldn't always be. We don't need the criminal justice involved. That patrol officer ought to be able to immediately, if it's appropriate, take that crisis, that individual crisis, and get them someplace. I think Seattle is a really good model for you on that, and I think the DA's office already went there and looked at it. But that's where, and that was on behalf of the prosecuting attorney there. He said we don't need to see it, and it was a great sort of handoff between law enforcement, where you empower your patrol officer and give them that discretion to immediately get them into the program. It very much seems to be working. So I think LASO might be the one on how do you communicate, because I think you need that. I think you really need an index of what's available.
I'm wondering about the education here in Texas of the District and County Attorneys Association with regard to risk assessment tools. And I'm a criminal court judge, so I'm not going to go to their conferences anymore, but do you know whether or not there have been presentations made to the prosecutors in the state of Texas about how helpful it would be if they turned to that model? Because I'm still seeing so much anecdotal prosecution that's not based on whether someone's likely to reoffend, and it's pretty frustrating. So.
Well, that too is one of the things I think that should be discussed here. What kind of education are you doing? If you're pushing out a tool, how do you make sure that folks are going to use it? Well, how are they going to use it is because they know about it. I know Rob Keppel is the executive director, so I don't want to speak on his behalf. I know Rob. He was the counterpart when I was running the California Association. So I think, again, putting it out there, and especially if you have Harris County going to the state association and saying, we want this on the agenda, let's get some training. I think that that's a big step forward. Also, you spoke on behalf of the judges. If the judges start... Different county, but if the judges start using the tool, then likely it will make it one that becomes available, and they'll start looking at it. In fact, we now have our district attorney. So, so the DA is present, and that's one of the things that. Devin, the question was, what about the Texas county and district attorneys? Are they doing training for prosecutors on the use of risk assessment? And I was just sharing that certainly that could be something that would come out of this conference as a recommendation to make sure you've got prosecutor education, not just here in Harris County, but statewide.
And we are actually doing it in Harris County with our prosecutors right now because of Dr. May's new assessment tool that the judges have adopted. I thought, do I need to say all that again? We've already started training on the TRES assessment system that Dr. May is implementing in Harris County that the district court and misdemeanor judges have agreed to use in risk assessment for probationers. So we're already doing training on that.
Yeah, but that's an example. Once you get folks doing it, then they go. I also want to say, now that Devin's here, I was on the plane yesterday. And usually when I come into a jurisdiction, you hear the district attorney or District Attorney Anderson, but even the guy on the plane was like, oh, I love Devin. So we know what kind of community we have here.
Yeah, well, that's great. In fact, I think we'll volunteer you to do one of those trainings for them because they have told me it's best to have fellow prosecutors speak to other prosecutors, which I can certainly understand. So you'd be terrific for that. And just a terrific job. Thanks so much. Do we have any other questions? I was just going to mention on that thing, by the way, that the San Diego DA, Bonnie Dumanis, is doing. They're almost to the point where the prosecutor will have the assessment before they decide what pleas to offer, which I think is going to be really interesting and helpful. We have one question down here.
Just a question about our jails themselves.
Yeah.
Medical care in jails is not noted for being adequate in many places. Does the state of Texas or do other states have funding programs for medical care and dental care, which is really egregious and neglect in other states? What can we do to get proper medical care when we do incarcerate someone?
Well, first of all, jails are, they can be county-based, they can be state-based, and so it's your jurisdiction.
County-based.
But here you're county-based, so here it's, can the county in some way recoup? Is it Medicaid funding? Is there a way that you can get additional funds? But the issues that the jails face, and I'm not the expert on it, is they are getting folks with a lot of significant conditions. And there can be the criticism, and I think Sheriff Joe is the one that speaks loudest on behalf of sheriffs, pointing out the medical care for the military, the housing for the military. Why is that okay for them, but not for a particular inmate? So it doesn't excuse that at all, but there's always that strategy. And the strategy also, and it depends on the state. The whole discussion of Obamacare has been one because with the inmate population and the expansion of Medicaid, for those states that have expanded Medicaid, there are a number of sheriffs, Cook County being that example, they're enrolling people at the time of intake. Because if you look at and I believe the current number is 11 million, is that right, Mark, releases a year? I think 11 million folks are released from jail every year in the United States. Of that 11 million, about 2/3 or more have no medical care. So can you have the strategy that the criminal justice system is not the provider? So addressing your thing about, is that the best place to provide medical care? Probably not, but can it link them to care? Can you get folks enrolled, and as they come out, or even if they're booked after that arrest, can you put them to some other place? But as far as different states, the states that are funding, and I was in Delaware earlier this week, yes, Delaware spends a lot on their county jails and state prison, but it's a consolidated state. So the state is responsible, and that's why the state does provide a lot more medical care. But with your county system, I don't know, and I think that I know the sheriff's on the panel, that may be that question within the sheriffs. And I attended the national, or do attend the national sheriffs. The medical providing medical care in jails is a huge, huge national issue.
Yep, well, you're absolutely right. And even for the people that are blue warrants, the parole violators and the people waiting to go to TDCJ who have already been sentenced to be picked up within 30 days, the sheriff still has to pay for their medical care, as Sheriff Garcia knows, so it's a huge issue. Well, I think that will wrap up our breakfast. We have our first panel in the LaSalle room, and starting in about 10 to 15 minutes, we'll give you a little break for coffee. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much.